love that graphic.
There was the super generic countdown, and that means that we're into another episode here on Long Box Punk. I am like 20 hours removed from vacation, so I'm still not back into the full swing of things with everything else yet. Just don't tell my boss, because I really didn't do much today. But here we are, because this is what I love doing. I love talking about indie comics. I love talking about punk rock, and I love talking about it with creators who make excellent comics. And this episode is exactly that. I've got Art, I've got Dave, and we're going to have a great time talking about California Inc. and the current Kickstarter, which has 16 days left, ending, if you're watching this not live, that's February 13th. You have to back it and get in on this campaign. It funded in 13 hours.
Just under 13.
What? Yeah. That's insane. I want to talk about how you did that, because that's very impressive. But before we get into all of that stuff, here I am getting ahead of myself because we're live, baby, and this is where I thrive. I want to know, like, how did you guys get into comics? How did you become a power duo? And how did California Inc. all come to be? Art, we'll start with you.
Oh, power duo. Dave, is that our thing? Like, do we need to wear like pins that say power duo?
We need like a logo for our shirts that we wear all the time. Some spandex outfits.
Then like a heart pendant that matches.
That's got to be that's a great idea. I've never seen that anywhere. That's a tremendous idea.
Probably a reason.
Marvel didn't jump on that with Deadpool and Wolverine. Let's see. How did my comic book fandom start? It started as a kid, just my brother would go to the comic shop by the naval base, because I'm a Navy brat, and we would go out there for church on Sundays, and between church and Sunday school there was this comic shop down the street that we would go visit, and I just tag along with my brother, and then I started getting into comics, and I did pick up a Wolverine #1, the one out the ongoing back then, so I still have that copy actually.
Nice.
But never read any of them. I got it for the art, because I'm an artist by trade. So I've had many long boxes of multiple copies of books too, sometimes just because I get them, and it was just for the art. I remembered one time when I moved to LA, and my friends were like, "Oh, it's a lot of comics." And I was like, and they're like, "What's your favorite?" I was like, "I don't read them." Just like got it for the art, big. I was one of those kids who grew up with Jim Lee, and then when Image did the thing when they put all of DC and Marvel on notice, and it was for the art for me. Eric Larson, all those guys. You're just like, what is this amazing deliciousness of comics? And went on to animation for a few years of my life in LA. And then I went on to do advertising for a few years, the last 18 years. And in that process, kind of found my way back into comics, but decided to write my own. And then we'll talk more about our power duoism, how we met, but kind of went from there. But I'm writing on the side when I can, as much as I can, and working with great people like Dave, and that's kind of how it all got to here.
That's awesome. I too have an older sibling to blame a lot of things on, not comics, but a lot of music came from stealing my sister's CDs.
There you go.
So Dave, what about you? How'd you get into comics?
I went on when I was really young, I went on a trip to New York, and we visited some family, and I had two cousins that they were the ones that were really into comics. And I remember they started to show me their collection. They took me to a comic book shop. And I was a kid. I don't even think I was over 10 years old. I was, real little. And they sent me off with like a stack of just the comics that they didn't want anymore. And I think a majority of them were like Uncanny X-Men, which was kind of funny. They were just really thrashed, I think was why they didn't care about them.
It wasn't like Alpha Flight.
There was
Hey,
Alpha Flight in there too.
you know.
Yeah, there was definitely
No,
Alpha Flight.
I'm just saying. I mean, those are
Yeah.
the ones that get handed out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and I hear like back in the day that was like really kind of, you know, a lot of how comics got distributed was like kids would just like trade them with their friends, and they just had these ratty copies all over the place. And it was a little, I guess predated my time with comics. But that definitely from those comics and from those like X-Men comics, I fell in love with it, and I did read them, but the story didn't. It was like a bunch of random issues, so there was the story didn't stick with me as much as the art, just like you, Art. And I remember trying to copy all the images, all the drawings out of them, and just doing that. And I definitely fell in love with it. That's with no question. Like I liked to draw a ton prior to that, but when I saw the comic books, I was like, this is what I want to draw. I want to tell stories like this, you know? And so like, I think comics kind of touched my life here and there as I grew up. Sometimes I was more serious about it than others. I had a point in college where I was really into drawing, but music kind of took over. And I was doing music for a lot of that time. But even within that, like my bandmates, we would practice and then take breaks. There was a comic book shop down the street, so we'd go and walk there and just check out the comics. And from that shop was really cool. The owner at the time was really awesome, and just introduced us to all sorts of books that were not superheroes, because I think at that time I felt like I wasn't that I had kind of gotten over that. And he introduced me to Sandman and Transmetropolitan and a bunch of other like Vertigo books that made me realize how different comics can be from what the mainstream stuff is.
Yeah.
And then again, it kind of, after that, I really wanted to draw comics again. Had kind of I think during that time, it was still, you bring your portfolio to a comic convention, and if they like it, then you're in. If they don't, then sorry. And so like in my case, it was kind of like, yeah, you got some work to do. And I understand. If I look at it, I can definitely see that. But at the time, it took me, it kind of pushed me back quite a bit. I had like a pretty thin skin. And then it took a few years of being in like sales and marketing to like harden up that skin. And then I was like, you know what? I can take rejection now. I don't care. You know?
Yeah.
You know, actually, I did actually glaze over a point there. You said part of your question I just completely missed was how I actually got into like this part of it. Dave brought up something that reminded me too. Is after I got into advertising, I started getting back into comics, and looking back at Image, I was like, oh, Image changed. It's not like their own version of superheroes, as Dave mentioned. And one of the ones that really got me was Greg Rucka's Lazarus. Like that one really drew me the hell in. And then I discovered like Rick Remender's, Deadly Class, and then his other books, and then just snowballed from there. Scott Snyder's books, all these creator-owned books really drew me in. Yeah. And so that's when I was like, oh, I like to read comics now. let me try to write one. And that was that's kind of how it went from there.
That's cool. So did you find that you were like modeling the like, how do I write a comic? What did they do? Like, did you do that sort of thing? Or were you just like, yes, I have ideas and this is the formula that I see played out, so like apply? Like, how did that work for you?
Good question.
Well, so I spent a lot of time before I started writing for comics, I was a creative director in advertising. So it's always coming up with new concepts, new ideas all the time. Like before you show the 3 concepts to your client, we would probably have 30 that we show internally. Before those 30, there'd be like 5 of us who come up with 30 of our own, and we slowly whittle them down. So as Dave was mentioning, we have thick skin because you have between us maybe 60 different ideas that will down to 3, and the client picks one, maybe just kills them all, but that kind of like building a story was not hard for me. It was what kind of story I want to tell. But what got me was I picked up some of my favorite books, like I mentioned, Deadly Class and Lazarus. I even did Briggs Land, I think, and a couple other books. I picked up their number ones, and then I just methodically said, okay, I took each one, I started paging them out, like oh, from this page to this page, they're doing this. This page to this page, you're doing this. And then I start seeing rhythms. And then it's basically, it's like any storytelling or music. And I was applying what I do for a 30-second spot to longer form. And then and I had the story of California in the back of my head for a while. And I was hanging out with my friend Justin, who's our editor. And he's like, put it to paper. I was like, me? So I did it, and it took some time. It took me a few years of like having lunches with Dave with Justin and dinners and just chatting about it and putting it down and him editing it. And after a few years, we did it. I mean, I wrote it down, and Justin helped me edit it. So it was great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Dave, when he approached you like, hey, I think I'm going to do this book, like what was that conversation like for you as the person that was going to be doing the artwork for it?
Well, me and Art met at LACC, right? LACC.
Yep. Yeah. That's
LA Comic Con, and yeah, I had a booth there at the time with another book that I worked on, the Space Auditorium, and he came and he was checking it out, and he didn't tell me he had written a story. He was just talking to me, and I always love, that's what I love about comic conventions, is being able to connect with people and hear what the feedback they have. And Art was great about that. And so we had an instant like chemistry. It was nice talking to him. And he came back a couple times, I think. And I think he bought all my books. So, I was like, he's cool in my life. And I think he eventually pointed out that he was working on a script and that he was interested. He was like looking for an artist. And I always like to read everyone's script that approaches me about a story. And there's definitely some that I've read them, and when I first started, I would always just be like, yeah, and then you kind of get roped into something that you maybe didn't want to do, or you have to tell someone no after you acted like you're interested. And so I definitely don't. And also at this point I'd realize it's a lot of work to make a comic book. You want to make sure it's something you like.
Yeah.
So I asked him to read it first, and he had it all done. He had like all 4 issues already written. It had a great build up. It had a good climax. It had a satisfying conclusion. All things that you think every story and script would have, but that's totally not true. And I think that's it really. I think I realize now that actually having a story well-rounded like that is pretty rare in the comic book world. You have a lot of great concepts and a lot of great character ideas, but a well-rounded story is actually still pretty hard to find. And so he definitely had that. The concept I thought was pretty different too. It's science fiction, but it's more grounded. And it had this angle that was interesting to me as a Californian, but also just as someone who's interested in world politics and how things kind of work, and just that bigger picture and how that can affect people. And so it had everything. It had that. It had interpersonal drama. It had some humor in it. Great idea. So I immediately knew it was something that I would like to work on. So it just all kind of fell into place really nicely and easily.
That's cool.
I was nervous, Dave, right? After I sent it to you, and it was like, I think it was like a week later you emailed me. I was like, oh man, he hates it. Yeah, I was like, he thinks I suck, and he's not. I don't know if I can face him at the next con. Like, no, I don't know if I went that far, but I was pretty nervous, dude. For anytime we put ourselves out there in any way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I think that's, and I said, I did do some sales and marketing, and it's one thing to sell other people's crap, but when you're trying to sell your own crap, well, it's different,
You bet on yourself first, right? If you can bet on yourself.
You're right, but it's totally true. But it's you need to have that thicker skin, because when you're selling yourself, the rejection when you're selling other people's shit, it's like, well, yeah, whatever. Of course, right? Yeah. But when it's yours, you're like, wait a minute, come on.
So
I put my heart in that.
I was gonna ask, because you both have had like marketing and advertising and say it, like, what's the different? Is it like a different mindset of walking into a convention versus like a corporate headquarters? Like, how do you prepare differently, or is it different? Is it the same, just like more personal because it's your story?
You mean trying to pitch our story to people
Yeah,
when
like to each other, like Art, when you approach
ah
him, like, "Hey, I got this, I got this story," and
yeah,
then like
no,
Dave is the artist too. Like, I'm curious to hear both sides
I
of that coin.
I think that's really extremely important as a creative to have that. And Dave could, especially someone who was in sales. Um, I imagine this in advertising, specifically what I was working on is a lot of social change. So not your typical, not typical, but not retail advertising where I could show at the end of the day to my client how many of something sold. Well, what I'm selling is early on, I was doing a lot of advertising of awareness for mental health. And 12 years ago, mental health wasn't something cool to talk about. Now I would say it's pretty common to talk about your mental health. And we were part of that conversation. And so I got used to pitching to groups of 30 to 50 stakeholders and community members about how I'm going to take their messaging and convert it into communication towards the masses to speak on their behalf. And on top of that, I have to pitch what I'm going to do for them. And when you do that, you have to have a certain level of confidence to put them at ease that you're taking care of them. Right.
Yeah.
So that's important. I think that that's an important skill. I think a lot of creatives should have for themselves in their own confidence of their work. When you're pitching your work to somebody, I know a lot of us are introverts, and it just so happens I had a job that taught me how to do this. But you should be excited about what you did, because what you did is badass no matter what you think. It took a lot of work to make that thing. Be proud of it. Talk about it like you're proud of it, not like you're selling it, because the selling part comes in you believing in it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, whenever I'm pitching, I don't feel like I'm pitching to like put on a dog and pony show and go, hey, what do you think? You know, I'm the smart me voice, you know. It's like, hey, dude, I'm pumped. I would like for you to be pumped about this if this is something you're into. But let me explain to you why I got to how I got here, and what drove me here, and why I think it's a good idea for you to consider it. You know, if it's not a match, I wouldn't talk to somebody about it. But then I liken my way of pitching to somebody as if I'm really excited about this. Let me explain to you why this is really something you should know about, or something you should be aware of, because I think it'll fit you. It's just me being excited. I'm sorry if I'm not excited, but when you start to get in this mode of let me sell you something, we, especially these days, we have everybody, especially the younger generation, has such a strong BS meter.
Yeah.
You know, there's something we talk about in advertising is a lot of people have a strong bullshit meter, and we can read it quick. So if you're not authentic about how excited you really are about it because you really mean it, we'll see right through it.
Yeah.
So just do it. Just you're talking to your best friend or somebody who you think you feel it's a match to. You go, hey, here's why I think you'll like it, and talk to them about how it connects with them in their way, and try not to use the same pitch for everybody. That's something I've learned. It took some time because I've pitched and fall flat on my face and had a talking to with my coworkers at the end. But you know, you learn by practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fascinating like difference of, I'm not pitching to sell, I'm pitching to excite. And like that idea is I'm gonna write that down, because that's really good stuff.
I think you narrowed it down just right. You should be in advertising, because the way you narrow that down is perfect.
I have a way with words, you know. I'm really good at talking, and sometimes I strike gold on like refining a ton of words into like really. For me, I'm a meat and potatoes person. So like I go into a meeting with my boss and I'm like, okay, so we were thinking about doing this thing, and here's why, and here's the thing. And I'm like, what do you need from me? Like, just cut the bullshit. Like you said, like cut the BS. Like, what do you need from me? Oh, you need this. Got it. Okay, perfect. I can do that. Thank you.
Yeah. It's 100% what it works best. Is just, are you giving me a heads up, or do you need me? Is this actionable? Do you need me to do something, or are you just letting me know?
Yeah.
Clarify that now so that I know what mode I'm in.
Yeah, there was a completely tangent. So there's a video that the church I used to work for showed. They did a whole like 4-week series on relationships and love and marriage and all that stuff. And there was a video that they showed where it's like, beautifully shot. Everything is very soft focus, and it's a girl talking, and you're seeing like, all this B-roll of the house and these things that they've collected in her sweater, but you never see her face. And you see the guy and he looks, he's listening intently and doing all this stuff. And she's talking about these headaches she has and all this stuff. And finally you see her face and she has a nail sticking out of her forehead. And she's complaining about like the sweater getting caught when and she's like, I just don't understand. Like, what's going on? And he's like, you have a nail in your face. Like, take out the nail. And she's like, it's not even about the nail. I just need to talk about it. He's like, but you can just pull it out and you won't have the problem. And she's like, you're not even listening to, and like that distinction of like listening to fix and listening just to listen. When my wife and I got married, I showed her this video. And I just need you to understand where I'm coming from. I want to fix problems. That's how I'm wired. If you need to talk about something, please just say like, it's not about the nail. And then, and so like now 10 years into our marriage, I'm like, it's great because we'll have moments. We're just on this past vacation. She was like, I just need to talk about the nail for like 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, got it. Go ahead, babe. I'm listening. Like setting those ground rules is so, so crucial. I don't remember how we got to the nail.
No, but that's actually a great point. Sometimes as fixers, it's actually more insulting to the person who wants to just be heard. They're like, you're minimizing my pain by telling me, shut up, here's the solution. I just want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then they actually might get better and pull it off. They just want to be heard.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so Dave, speaking of nails that were falling out of our faces, how do you, was it different for you with like taking your portfolio to a convention versus walking into potential clients or like in your sales position? Like, was that prep different for you, or was it just kind of that same shifting that Art talked about?
Yeah, it was really different. The career, the job I came from, I went like, it's kind of weird because I went with this in school and in college. I definitely had this real punk rock mentality, and I was just like all about sticking it to the man and F corporations and all that stuff. And then I got out of college and I was like, man, I gotta
go to the corporations.
And I oddly went into like this real kind of boiler room sales kind of job. And it was telecommunications. And it wasn't like door to door, like neighborhood residential stuff, but it was door to door businesses. Like you go into all these businesses, you try to sell them internet and phone service. And it's pretty brutal. Like people, even businesses really don't like wanting to talk to salespeople like that. And but I like a good challenge, and I realized that it's an interesting skill to try to get. And I luckily had another guy that I was working with who just like kind of looked at it the same way. It was like, forget it. Let's just try to sell stuff. Figure out how to do it, right? And I hated it at the time. But it became kind of like a really interesting skill to like learn how to get in front of people, get what you want across to them, and kind of persuade them to do something that maybe they weren't thinking about doing before. But I never liked doing something that someone totally didn't want to do. But lots of people need what you got. They just don't realize it. And same goes with comic books. Sometimes they're going to be into your book. They just don't realize it. But it's totally different on how you sell your comic to someone versus telecommunications. And I learned that pretty quickly. Like you can't do any of those kind of boiler room tactics and really, push people to know and all that stuff. People want a more authentic experience with their entertainment, I think, and they don't like the BS meter is much higher, I think, in that regard. And I was okay with that. I preferred to not have to put that like sales guy hat on, and just be who I am, which is an artist and a creator and someone who's enjoying what I do, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. And I think that that's also the nice thing about this world or this industry is that when people come looking for comic books, they are kind of more open to looking and seeing what's out there, versus telecommunications. They're like, who wants to shop for telecommunications, right?
Yeah, there's fun in the shopping for comics. There's not fun at all of comparing like, speeds and ROI. Yeah,
exactly. So I learned to change that up a lot, and it's a better place in my mind, as far as that goes too. I realized that that's it's something I know how to do, but not something I like to do, I guess. So and I prefer the sales process of selling comic books much more, and a lot of it is really just, you just have to put yourself out there as much as you can. It's rather than putting your face in front of everyone as much as you can. You're just putting your work
Dave,
out there.
At LATC, you went. I was walking by your table, and you said, "Hey, come here, kid. Come here.
Hey, you like comics?
Yeah,
come here. I got some."
Full Carney mode. He's missing a tooth. No,
It's crazy. Yeah, listen. The dentures look great, by the way. Really fine work you had done.
Thank you.
So give me tell me about California Inc. Like what's it about for those that don't know, and then how did you come up with it, Art, and how did you, Dave, your artwork on this book is insane. It's so realistically believable that it's oh no, all of these things could be real. Like the 3D hologram stuff and the it's all there, and it fits, and it feels super immersive. And as I was reading the preview copies that you sent, I was just like, dude, this is so real. This is legitimately happening in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't care. I'm here. It's going to happen. Everything is already existing. It's all there. So kudos to both of you for just creating a super freaking fun and just fascinating book. That's got way more than you might expect just reading the Kickstarter page that you've got. Clearly people are into it because you funded in just under 13 hours. So tell me about it. What's the story so far? What can people expect with this 4th issue? What's going on in California?
The quick log line is in the near future, California becomes a corporate country with factions fighting to shape the new nation. So as you mentioned, something Dave and I talked about was, it is supposed to feel future, but not too far future. It should feel attainable. The funny thing was, I wrote it back in 2015 through 16, 17, something like that, 2017. Yeah, I think that's around then. And Dave and I met right before COVID, right? Or was it after? It was after or before, whatever, something around that time.
It was right after, because I remember I knew you like this for a little bit.
That's right. That's right. We couldn't understand it. Maybe that's how we got along. We're like, what'd you say? Oh, yeah. Comics? You what? Oh, you're hilarious.
Hey, you with the eyes, come over here.
You with the mask on? Where you going? Come on.
Oh man. But yeah, it feels topical now, but I didn't think it would be as topical as it is now when I wrote it 3-4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago even. But it was at the time when I was a creative at working in corporate America. So I was making fun of corporate America because it felt very geopolitical in the office. There's certain things you couldn't do because of office politics. Mm-hmm. And so there was that, plus the combination of being a Californian who has grown up in San Diego, lived in LA, moved out to Boston, and I've driven through the southern Bible Belt of the US. So I've seen many different versions of people, which are just amazing and fascinating how different things can be just within a few hundred miles of each other. Yeah. And so that kind of bubble up in my head of how self-righteous people might think Californians can be. And so decided to kind of, write a story of what if we, and by the way, there's a couple articles recently have come out about California trying to secede. How funny is that? There's some petitions going on, which is, we know it's never going to happen. Calm down.
Yeah. But take a deep breath. Everything's going to be
this happens every 4 or 5 years, right? There's always something about that.
Yep.
But at the time when I brought it up with Justin, our editor, who is a good buddy of mine, we met at a comic shop. he was like, yeah, do you know there's a RAND report that shows like California is like the 6th strongest economy in the world? And I was like, whoa. So we started chatting more about that. And I think currently we're the 2nd largest economy in the world, so if we had our own fresh water source, we could possibly provide produce for all of North America, so that shows how strong we are in terms of economically. So thought about that, Hollywood is the strongest PR you would possibly want, just the allies you'd make along the coast of California, the West Coast, and how that could shift things in favor of the California corporation. So just kind of put that all together in my head, just I guess venting because of my job, and also like being a proud Californian. Just put that all together and had fun kind of thinking about who would be impacted by that doesn't have a voice in comics as much as it should, is like our indigenous people here. They've been colonized, and now they've been turned into resident employees. So how does that affect them versus who are the people that actually made this happen, versus do we have a board, or do we have like a government? Just started hashing that stuff up through people affected by that, and had a lot of fun putting that together. It was a nice escape from doing advertising during the day, but also like exhausting, because as a father of 3 and a full-time job, like when do I write? Oh, at night, and so yeah.
That's unfortunately all too familiar of the working for the man, and then in the evenings burning the midnight oil, just writing against the man, and
yes, correct.
Tale as old as time, Art.
I do love Beauty and the Beast. That's a great movie. It's one of my favorite.
We were just at Disney, so like all of the Disney things are just like right on the top of my brain. So Dave, like for you, were you also like tapping into that like anti-corporate type feel, where like did you pick up on the like, oh, this is almost like a satire of us as Californians?
Yeah, definitely. It was pretty clear in the script, what he was, the things he was trying to say in there, and yeah, I had my experience with corporate America as well, and my opinions on that, and so it's like, I think it's one thing to again kind of going with the punk mentality to hear the songs and the music and what those artists were saying at the time, and be like, yeah, fuck those guys. I don't know if I can say
that, but this is it, long box talk, man. I don't censor anything, like just DIY, baby.
Off comes the pants.
You're wearing
and then to actually go through it and feel why it is the way it is, and it makes it a much stronger understanding of it. And I still feel, I think that the way I always have felt, but you at least have a greater understanding of it, like why a lot of us do have to work for the man, even if we feel a certain way, and I think like there's the way capitalism has its hold on this country is pretty strong, and no one person or one group can really easily change that, but having a greater understanding of, I guess, right and wrong, and what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong will probably help that. And so I've always felt like that entertainment is a good message. Music, those are great ways of kind of getting that ideology out there, so that it can become stronger. But to completely resist it, like some of the music I used to listen to would tell me to do, and I would love to do, is hard, especially if you do want to have kids, or you want to have a safe place to live, and you want to live in a way that this country is kind of set up to be. But that being said, I thought that California explored a trajectory that was really cool to look at and think about, and Art had clearly thought it through really well. So the art came pretty easily. A lot of it's like it's in the future, but not super far. So I looked at a lot of references. I looked at a lot of kind of like what technology is going, and how things are currently, and I tried to extrapolate off of that just a little bit, because I've now seen things change, but don't change that much, you know. Things get sleeker, or they get a little cooler looking, or they get a little more powerful. And so it was fun though. It was different. Like I think the other comic I draw has this really distant, far away, you know, future kind of idea that you can, and I could really just create anything and just have a lot of fun with that. And that's fun too. But having the constraints that California Ink kind of put on me also was a welcome challenge. It was really cool. And in particular, like I think I thought a lot about like the fashion too that people would be wearing. Like, what would people in boardrooms be wearing? Obviously, suits have kind of persevered for a really long time, but they still have changed. And to kind of try to think about just even how the silhouettes of corporate wear would be, or you know, like semi-corporate wear. You know, there's a lot of people that are kind of working there, but not really, and you know, they're not total slackers, so they can't dress super sloppy, and it's like it was a different way of looking at it, and it took my creativity in a more kind of constrained, but also I thought interesting direction.
Yeah,
Dave was really good about keeping us on brand sometimes too. There was a couple times where I sent some notes about, oh, what if we did this? And then Dave was like, but what if we did this instead? Because, and you would go into like the psychology of, well, if it was a corporate nation, they would do this instead. I was like, oh yeah. Yeah. You know, it was, I love that. I love that. It's been fun bouncing things off of Dave like that. He's always keeping me in check too, because my mind would go off.
So that's a perfect segue into like what has the process been like for the two of you creating this comic book together? Art, I know you had like all 4 issues already scripted. Like, what was has it changed? Like, did you stick almost verbatim to what you originally wrote, like that 5-7 years ago, or has it been updated and changed or adjusted as Dave gets his hands on it and sees and like starts putting the pencil to the paper? Like, how has that process been for you guys?
Story wise, I'm proud to say it hasn't changed. I know I have some friends who I've worked with and gotten to know over the last years, and as they release their issues and people react, they adjust the story, which I personally would not want to do. I want to stick to what I've done and what I planned and what got them in the door to begin with. It's kind of I liken that to like what J.J. Abrams was forced to do with Lost, with seasons 3 and 4. Like he was forced to add 2 more seasons because people loved it, and he had to come up with other random stuff for the sake of filling more space. Love the show, but didn't love those seasons. And it came together nicely, but I think it tainted it tainted a little bit of it. But I wanted to stick true to it. But I wrote the script again before knowing Dave in full script, which a lot of artists don't love because it's fully prescriptive. I did it because I didn't know who I was going to work with, and as an artist myself, I wanted to make sure that it could be illustrated. You know, I don't want to come up with like a 30 panel page. That wouldn't make any sense. So I wrote in full script in my head like I would storyboard a 30-second commercial, but thinking about it somewhat in panels and thinking of page turn. But when I met Dave, I was like, Dave, this is our book now, not my book that you happen to be illustrating. It's our book. I've seen your work, do your thing, and I'll let Dave take it from here. And tell us what you did.
Yeah. So I think he had it really nicely mapped out, which is I kind of like, as long as the writer is flexible with it, which Art definitely was. And so it's nice when you have that, because then like you can be creative where you want to be creative, and when you just nothing there necessarily that you're like thinking, at least they've got the whole idea, they've got the angle, he had the panels written out, so you had that to fall back on. So it was just a matter of kind of taking that, adding my vision on that, and then embellishing or changing, or if I felt like. But I think there's very few changes, and even some of the things I remember being like, hey, I think I'm going to do this. When I went to actually draw it, I was like, no, the way it's in the script is actually better.
No, but give yourself a lot of credit. There's a lot of scenes where you made it that much better when you, like I said, at the end of issue 2, the falling scene. I love that, like the way the way that happened, I was like, I wasn't quite sure. And then at the end of issue 1, 2, without spoiling that, the back and forth conversation, I was like, I wrote this. I think this is going to work. And Dave like solved it. And then Frank, on top of that, our letterer, he solved that part, which I wasn't sure happened. I was like, as the writer, I'm like, yeah, they'll figure it out. And they really did. It made it way better than I wrote it. So I love it.
That's cool. I love hearing that. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, comics really do have a different language to like film or a book. Like it's not quite as linear as those two are. You can have a comic book and like the page is, some people will read it in a linear way, and a lot of it still is pretty linear, but it has a little bit less of that because you got the whole page to kind of work with. And I like to try to play around with that without trying to confuse the reader too much, but it is cool when you have when you do something that is kind of unique to comic books. Like I always love that when there's something that I'm like, I don't think you could have done this in a book or in a movie. It's really kind of, the scene can be done as a comic book.
Yeah, I do love, I mean, I'm a little partial to comics, but I love when creatives play with like pushing the boundary of what that comic can be, and whether or not that's like using the illustration of the page layout to have a back and forth conversation in a way that just reading, lines of text in a regular prose book wouldn't give you. It'd be like, oh yeah, dialogue said they, dialogue said them, dialogue, whatever. In a comic book, you can completely flip that and still have a conversation, but it look much differently than like two talking heads, just going back and forth. Like there's so much you can do with that. But as a non-artist, I don't know how. I'm like you, art where it's like, nah, they'll figure it out. Like there's gonna be dialogue, like make it cool and not just like talking heads. Go. And like seeing those words then come back to you as like, holy shit, this is an illustrated page. Like, do you still have those moments where you're like, when you get like the proofs back of the book, like, do you have that like excitement of just like, this came out of my head? Like, is that still there for you?
For me or Dave? Because for me, I mean, every time Dave sends me anything, literally I go, whoo, like I just can't wait to see what he did to it. Because I've seen the thumbnails, which I already trust. I could see what the full is going to look like, the full illustration. But once I get that email, I would stop the car if I'm on the road and I'd like jump into my drive and like look at it, or I would immediately stop looking at client work and look at that page, and try to let it settle. But it's always so exciting. It's always so exciting because, like I said, it's our book, and so as much as it's something that I wrote, Dave can have as much fun as he wants with it, and it's so cool whenever he does something different. Like, oh, I like that. Like more, please. Yes, please, sir. Might have some more. Yes. It's always so exciting for me. It never goes away. It's like a present every time he sends me an email. Like, what is this? So
one of the few times you're excited about receiving emails, right?
I always say this. Remember when we first got our email? We're like, oh, I got an email address. I'm so happy. Now it's like, oh, it just means work.
Yeah.
Every blue dot. Stupid blue dot.
I have all that stuff turned off, man. I can't handle it. I turned off. I had a focus thing set up while we were on vacation because I would no social media, no anything. And it was amazing. Like I loved it. And part of me is like, I'm just throwing away all of my tech. And then I look at my current setup and I'm like, I can't throw any of this away. I need all of it. But like turning off that focus and then seeing the little thing pop up with my emails, like, why? Why do I have 107 emails from a week? What has happened? And then like 80 of them are Kickstarter updates. That's
sorry to add to that.
No, it's great. I love it. Because once I switched with emails, right? You're like, oh, I have this main email. I'm a psychopath. I have like an email for the show. I have my personal email. Yep. I used to officiate weddings, and so I had a wedding email. And like everything is branded all the time for everything.
Yeah. You're professional.
I have a spam email of like, I'm never going to look at this, but I get 10% off if I give you my email. Here's I have an email just for that. And I never check it. Don't do that, kids. It's hard to keep track of. But like, so Dave, as you're creating stuff, is there, so you do ink and watercolor, is it all analog, or do you like do the inks analog and then colors digitally? Like, what's your process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I played around with all of it, and I think you asked an earlier question about making a comic book, and do you kind of subscribe to the methods that people have, like the tried and true methods versus kind of paving your own way.
Yeah.
And when I first started drawing comics, I definitely tried it, doing it the way that all these books and masters say this is how you do it, and I felt very like it felt very rigid. Like you if you're not doing this, if you're not hand lettering your comics, it's not really a real comic book, or you're not. And I think that getting away from it for several years, and then kind of coming back with more confidence in myself as not only as an individual but as an artist, I was more willing to just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna make this comic book, and I'm gonna make it in the way that I think is going to be the best way to make it. And There's definitely some things that I didn't do that I later was like, I see why people don't do that. But now I know for reals. And so there's definitely things I do that I think that maybe some people wouldn't have done in the past, but like it works for me. And so to answer that question, I do both. I've kind of tried doing it all analog at one point, and I've tried doing it all digital at one point, and I've kind of settled in this kind of middle ground. So like I'll do most of the layout, inking, and even a fair amount of the watercolor I'll do on illustration board, but then I'll definitely scan it and do another layer of other elements on top of that. Like the hologram stuff that you're talking about, or sound effects. Sometimes I'll actually draw the sound effects, but it depends on the sound, I guess. And then like a lot of the tech or even buildings, I think I found like I prefer to do like a lot of when there's a lot of angles and that kind of like hard edges. The computer's just a lot easier to do that with. And especially if it's not something that's super focal point of something, like if it's just a background office suite or something like that. But if you want to give it a lot more character, and you're doing this establishing shot of a city, I might probably do that on paper. So I kind of jump around on both, and ultimately, if you were to look at the pages that I have done, like you would see, it would look like they're unfinished, or some of them would look finished, some wouldn't. I kind of liked that. I think that at least for California Ink, that's kind of been the process that I've kind of liked working with the most. It also gives a lot of flexibility too. Not that art ever has me change anything, but I've worked with other creators where they do like a lot of things change.
Yeah, that I can only imagine like doing a full page of artwork and be like, here it is, and like, that's not that's cute, good, yay, change all of it. You're like, so
can you just move this a little to the left? And you're like, no,
I can't copy paste, man. It's paper.
Yeah. But yeah, so and then like even that, like when you scan something, like you could easily, even if I did it on paper, like having the final be done, like go through a bit of Photoshop allows you to move things, increase the size of something, cover up a spot where your hand slipped a little bit, But on the flip side, when I tried to do something all digital, I did a comic where I pretty much did it all digitally. It actually took me a lot longer than when I do things analog, because you're able to mess around with it so much. You're able to redo things over and over and over and over and over again. You're able to zoom in and just scrutinize the most minute details. Whereas when you're working on a piece of illustration board, you kind of just have to. You're kind of, again, you give them those parameters that you have to kind of stick with, and I think that's good for me. It gives me a little bit gives me a little more focus. And so
I've been working more on digital lately, Dave, because you mentioned the buildings earlier. I just discovered on you're gonna laugh. I just discovered on Procreate the grid where you could put like as many different points of the grid. What am I talking about? Perspective grid. Yeah, because I'm doing a lot of I'll share it with you later. I'm doing this series of illustrations with vehicles. So there's a lot of like getting your angles just right. Man, that really helps because if you make a card that's wonky, you could tell it's wonky. That thing is amazing.
Those are good. I got a book on freehand perspective that I actually really like, so the perspective is one of those things that the old OG artists would be like, you got to know your perspective so well. And and they're just like, if you don't know your perspective, it's terrible. And I agree with that. Knowing perspective is important, but like scrutinizing it to this like ridiculous degree, I don't think is always that important. And this freehanding perspective book I thought was really cool, and that it's just like you kind of get rid of the rulers. You still kind of follow the rules of having like the vanishing points and that kind of a thing and horizon line, but you're not as beholden to it, and it winds up giving it I found a much more organic, much more real feeling. Sometimes when you're like too beholden to the exactness of your points, it can look very sterile.
That's a good point, because in real life, like not everything is on the same exact. They might be on the same plane, but a different grid. That's a great point. Yeah. Well, then forget my grid thing then.
And it also depends on.
You're stupid. This vehicle series, or I'm going to delete the files. I'm not going to show it to you anymore. Forget it.
But Chris, actually, I wanted to jump back on another question you asked Art about, like, what does it feel like to see the book? And I get this real thrill when, like, you read a script and you can visualize how you want to create it and you do the thumbnails, but it's not till it's like all done and you see the word bubbles and you can read, like the magic of comic books, like that. It happens then, like when you're drawing it. It's not happening while I'm drawing it. I'm looking at these freeze frames of these different scenes. But when it's all done and I finally read it, I love it does feel like magic to me too. Even though I drew all of those panels and I didn't write all the words, but I drew all the panels. It's still
you just drew awesome. Every single thing. I like how you minimize that. I'm like, that's kind of super important.
Yeah,
it is the comic.
But I still get that, and you read that scene and you see it all.
That's awesome.
Why it all kind of came in, why all those panels work in conjunction to create this movement, to create this atmosphere, to create this tension. I love that.
I think one of my favorites is still the one where young Alona does homework with her little brother. That whole sequence. Man. You put some drama in there. I was like, things like that. Like, I know I wrote a certain way, and I saw your thumbnails, and then I saw the black and white, and then like he's something about it. Just once you see like the acting that you put in there, and like the sizing and everything, like just the intensity, it doesn't go away. It's always fun, man. It's always so fun to just see what you do. Then like, it got so much gooder.
I do love like looking when you've got a bunch of characters or a bunch of background stuff. I love like scrutinizing that stuff, and not in like I'm going to be critical and see if their buildings are all straight lines, because I don't care about that. Like, I really don't.
Most people don't, right? Yeah.
Like you're like, oh yeah, that's a building, even though like the lines might be all wonky and whatever. It's like, no, that's a building. But I love looking at background details, because I feel like as a reader, it seems like that's where the artists have fun, where it's like, I'm going to put this little thing in here, or like, I'm going to make this character given this weird side eye over here. Like, do you find that that's true, or is that just
100%? And I'm glad that you do that, because I love, in particular, I like crowd scenes. Like, I love to create the stories of the people in crowds, I think when I first realized, like, I think it was 100 bullets. And that book, the artist, I'm blanking on his name right now. I'm sorry. He's so cool. Blanking on his name.
Well, he's
Rizzo?
watching
Rizzo?
right now, so
I think, yeah, he's watching. But he would do these scenes, and I swear, there's whole stories happening with the crowds. Like it's like happening in a bar, and there's whole stories happening with the people that are just in the bars. You know, like someone's hitting on someone and getting rejected, and just like you see it all kind of play out in the. And I loved that, just like you're saying. I loved looking at that. So I've always kind of thought about that when I work on comics as well, and just kind of play around with that, and with definitely with the people. And try to kind of create these little source, maybe small stories. You know, are they sad about something? Why is she sad? Or, you know, like, what are they talking about? Or, you know, what just happened to that? Or who are they? You know, like I like that. I love that. Actually.
That's funny because that's an advantage in comic books, like you two mentioned, because you have the ability to stop and look at something that's still. When I was in animation, we had to make the background characters literally background. Like we couldn't give them too much. We would sneak ourselves into some background scenes, and our directors would catch it, or the writers would catch it, who didn't know who we are. Like, hey, that looks too specific. Get rid of that character, because they don't want it to be a distraction from the main characters. To the point where it's funny, I didn't love drawing background, so we would do what's called salt and pepper shakers as people, just the head, and then like this shape, and you just do a whole bunch of those in perspective to show that there's a crowd, and you let the in-betweener figure out to fill in the background. The opposite of what Dave said, which is you create little stories in the back. I was like, nope, salt and pepper shakers. Just a little round head.
Well, there's that balance. You definitely don't want it to be like distracting, but yeah, you can have some fun with it.
But I think specifically, Chris, I don't know if you remember issue 3. There's Dave built in some scenes in the background that kind of reflect some of his fandom towards a show. So I don't know if you want us to spoil that for you, or if you want to catch it yourself.
I think I missed it, because as you're saying it, I was like, no, yeah,
it's subtle. It's extremely subtle, and I caught it because I worked on The Simpsons. Oh, I gave it away.
So sometimes you put in things in comics because you want people to notice it. Sometimes you just do it because it's fun for you. You know, like that was definitely one of the ones where I was like, "This is fun for me."
Dave didn't tell me. He didn't tell me. And I was reviewing the page, and I was like, "Dude, is this?" He's like, "Yes, it is."
100%. Yeah.
Yes. Like, you are not wrong at all. You are correct.
Now I'm gonna go back and reread issue 3. Like I completely missed that.
Yeah.
But like I love that stuff. And I like it's, as you mentioned, it's specific to comics. Like there's no other medium that you can consume the main story and pick up either simultaneously or like alongside. Because a lot of times, and I've found, because I've been reading comics since I was like 6, so like I've read a ton of comics, and I don't read them the same now that I did as a kid, right? As a kid, I'd pick up a book and I'd be like, holy crap, that cover is awesome. Or like 90s image, like, look at the shape of that girl. Like, you know,
why did 6-year-old you have such a deep voice? That's why.
I matured very young. Okay.
Smoked early and stopped later.
That's right. Most kids don't start till I was just 5'8". Listen, I had the beard too. It's crazy. I was a really weird 5-year-old. But
I still can't grow a beard. I'm jealous.
Listen, if I don't have it a certain length, I can't grow one either. Like if I were to trim this, it's just like 6 hairs and a bunch of white, and it's dumb. See, this is the beauty of doing live. Like I love it. But so as a kid, right, I was just mainly looking at the pictures. I really didn't read the dialogue and stuff. And sometimes I would get the story, and other times I didn't care because I just picked it up because I had a dude with giant claws on the cover fighting Savage Dragon. Like that's all I wanted. And then I got into the like, I'm gonna read comics, right? I'm gonna set aside time and I'm gonna like consume stories. And so I started only reading them if they were collected in a trade, because then I get the full story, and that's what mattered. And now I'm at a point where it's like sometimes I still do that, And for budget reasons, I trade weight on a lot of series because there's just so many that are coming out. And I'm like, I want to read that and that and that and that. I made the mistake of asking Threads like, hey, there's a lot of people using the like hashtag of comic threads that are posting about DC, like what is going on in DC right now? And then that's the most popular thing I've ever posted because everybody's like, oh, you got to read it. And so now I have a list of like 80 DC titles that are currently happening that aren't all Batman, which is shocking because I thought DC only put out Batman.
Absolute Wonder Woman's supposed to be really good, right?
Yeah.
I heard that's supposed to be a really good one right now. I need to check that out.
I the one that kept coming up that I have no knowledge of is New Gods. Like a ton of people were like, oh, New Gods is incredible. Like obviously the absolute like Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman that are coming out get really high praise and were mentioned a bunch. But the New God series, I was like, I didn't see that coming because I have no idea what that's even about.
I bet they're about gods and they might be new.
They're probably new. Yeah. They're not the old gods. Yeah. That's, I thought the same thing, but like, I read books differently now. And I also read far less superhero, far more literally everything else, predominantly like sci-fi and horror. That's my jam. But like, because in horror comics, it's its own thing because the power of the page turn. And you mentioned it earlier of like thinking about writing for panels and the page turn. Like, is that something that you developed just like looking at and reading comics, or is that because of your experience with storyboarding that you like were already thinking about that? Like, how did that? Because I was reading comics for like 30 years before I was like, oh, the page turn matters. And you were just like, yeah, like page turns and panels and like it just casually, like how did your brain come up with that?
Well, with film and TV, everything it just goes. So you have different kinds of page turn, which is like, is it a wipe or is it some kind of transition? So it's transitions, where with comics, it is, do you get a spread? That's awesome. Like it's a full 2-page spread. Is it, or like, was it Batman number? Forget number was with Scott Snyder where Capullo made you spin the book. Yeah. I don't know if you remember that issue. But there's something that made me go, wow, there's something really cool about how cadence can be dictated by number of pages and where they end versus on the page flip. It's like, oh, it's a new cadence. Or is it a reveal? It's something you just kind of always, I don't know. It's something I always kind of loved about comics. So I was looking forward to writing for that versus something that is continuous on screen. I think that was something I just always look forward to doing.
That's cool. And Dave, with your art, like, do you put more attention into like, oh, this page turn matters. Like this has to be a super captivating, like grab your face. Like, how do you direct the reader's eye as you're like drawing and creating the page layouts and all of that stuff? Like, is that natural for you?
I think, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think by saying natural, I go by intuition. So yeah, I think I did do a lot of that. I don't have a ton of hard, fast rules. I do like the rule of thirds. And I think that's a concept that's really good to understand when you're working with comic book pages. Cause it's a really simple way of kind of knowing where the points, at least on a page, are. As far as like the page turn, that's kind of usually up to the writer to determine for me. But when it's important, I definitely put some weight there, and think about that, and how that's going to be. I was thinking about when you're just talking about kind of like the rhythm of a comic book, and there's like Frank Miller was talking about how in Sin City, he has this sequence where there's this character getting hit by a car, and he like made it, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages of just this person getting hit by this car and going through the air. And he says like that was his way of really like putting it in slow motion and creating like kind of making the reader realize that this is just like a slow-mo situation happening and really kind of absorb. Because like it's a whole page. You're gonna like take some time to look at it, and then you turn to the next one. Oh, okay, still getting hit by the car. And but I loved that. I love that. Like that kind of getting to understand how someone would read a book, how someone would read a comic book, and playing with that and having fun with it and knowing, I think that's the thing with like comics, and there's all sorts of cool tricks and things you can do. You don't have to do them, but if you know them and you understand how they work, and it can be a lot of fun to kind of use and see how different it comes off to the reader.
It's cool. Yeah, you got to understand the rules in order to break them the right
100%.
way. And that's one of those cliche things. So my degree is in broadcasting. That's one of the things that we heard in like our media aesthetics classes and like film production and stuff. It was like, you can't just do something because you don't know. Like you have to know what it is and then break it intentionally, because otherwise it's going to feel wrong. And like people are going to feel that.
Yeah, you can tell when somebody doesn't know and they're just like, oh, that's just my style. Like, no, you don't know it. You don't know what you're doing.
I don't like to draw feet in a weird angle all the time.
You don't know what you're breaking because you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, you could. It's weird how you could kind of sense that. It's super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Like we talked about the, force perspective and using like vectors to guide, even like in a movie, like where people's eyes move across the screen and that sort of thing. And so because that's my background, like that's how I now think about comics as I'm reading them, of just like, I'll take time and I won't read anything on a page and I'll just look at the layout and like, where are my eyes going? And like, how is the artist directing my eyes? And then like, does it match the story? Is that a reason for that? Like, confession time. I don't love The Watchmen. I don't like the static 9-panel pages, one after another, after another, after another, after another. Like, gee whiz, it took me so long to read it.
What about the TV show? The TV show version?
The TV show version I can get behind.
Yeah,
like,
that was solid, right?
The story of it is fascinating.
Yeah.
That for me, the delivery and the intentionality of having it that stoic all the time. Like I saw this like hot take or whatever on Threads of like, don't recommend Watchmen to a new comic book reader. And some people are like, oh, don't gatekeep, bro. Like people are going to read what they want to read. And I'm like, as someone that's been reading it for 3 decades, I kind of feel the same way. Like,
oh, is it more of if the approach to that is because it's an acquired taste, let them grow the taste first, then give it to them later? I could probably agree with that. Like let them like comics first, then say, oh, now you're ready for this.
Now you're ready for like
the IPA of comics.
Yeah. Yes, like it's an acquired taste. And as a 6-year-old smoking cigarettes and reading Image comics, I never would have touched Watchmen. Yeah. Like I would have looked at him and like, no, boring, move on. Like give me Capullo's Spawn and the way that and like McFarlane's artwork, like give me the capes that just curl around things and that are doing their own like give me that artwork. Don't give me 9-panel political story. Like I have to have an appreciation for it, and that's the only reason honestly that I read it. Was like as a comic fan, I have to be able to say that I've read The Watchmen.
Yeah.
And so I read it and I was like, I don't know that I need to keep this. Like I might be taking it back to Half Price Books and being like, here, sell this to. And then I looked down the shelf and I was like, oh, 7 other people did the same thing. Got it. Okay, cool.
Oh,
but like it also in a very roundabout, and this wasn't the intent, and I don't remember why I started talking about it, but like there's a comic book for everybody. Who is California Inc. for?
We have it right now in our description as if you're a fan of shows like Showtime's Homeland or HBO Succession, kind of where those two meet, you've got the pulse pounding action of military tactics with the boardroom backstabbing and shit talking of Succession. But I don't. Have you ever watched Succession? Like, there's no redeeming character. I wouldn't say that's the case for us, but it's a little bit of both kind of combined. So there's a lot of talking head moments, but it's building to something that action then kind of pays off later on.
Did you have that in mind as you were creating it? Like, were you already thinking about those things?
No, I didn't watch Succession till years after I wrote it. So it was,
Okay.
for me, it was just, I just wanted to tell a story I want to see on the shelf. And something that interested me at the time, which is being mad at corporate America because I was bored,
Yeah.
and then glorifying us Californians for being as cool as we think we are, but also making fun of us at the same time. So I wouldn't say anything like that was intentional. Although, I loved Homeland when it was on, and I was writing this, and at the same time I loved Lazarus, which is a huge influence on me when I first started writing. So I would say those two definitely had something to play, have some influence on when I put this together.
That's cool. And Dave, for you, like, what are your personal influences, and then like how did those show through in your work with California?
Let's see. That's I think my influences are kind of different from what normally would be what I think someone that would create California Inc. would do. Like I was, I really was like influenced by like Jamie Hewlett from Country Tank Girl, and what else? I also really loved
Bachelor?
Botch. Yeah, sorry. I'm like blanking on everything right
Yeah.
now. I'm like, who is that? Yeah.
They made pictures. Come on, you know the name.
100 Bullets, Azarella, by the way.
What did I used to look at before I started drawing it? Yeah, and so I think like a lot of the artists I like usually did do really big, like go big with their art. And I think California Inc., while I definitely went big, I think that there's a lot of subtlety in the story, a lot of subtlety in the art, and there's not a lot of like there's not always like these crazy looking spaceships or awesome looking costumes, like superhero costumes, or like the stuff that you would typically see the artists that I have liked do. And what I've typically done in the past, I guess, and too. So, but I still feel like it has something that that is really interesting to look at and exciting to read. That kind of branches away from that, but you can take the teachings and the styles and the ideas that from more traditional comic stories and use it here, which creates, I think, a unique experience for a reader. It's not I don't think it's your typical comic book story either, so I think comic book readers will enjoy it as a kind of a refreshing kind of a story, and then people who haven't read comic books can enjoy it because it's not a story like if they're like, I don't read comics, I don't care about superheroes, or I don't care about even spaceships and that that's the horror stuff, right? This is an exciting and interesting story without any of the usual bag of tricks that comic books usually has.
That's cool. So speaking of like influences in West Coast, I can't help but notice the guitars that you have floating behind your head. Like, are you also a musician? Like, do you play? Are you in like 18 bands right now? Like,
I wish I would. I found in my life that I can really only put all my creative stuff into like one thing at a time. When I try to spread it thin, one thing always just kind of gets left behind or just loses focus. So and at one time it was definitely music. I spent most of my high school, college, and even a few years after college being really all about music. And I played guitar. I also played bass. I sang in one band, but I'm not proud of that. And it was a hardcore band, so you don't really sing.
yeah.
I had a very angsty scream at the time, so that was fine.
Was it like mid to late 2000s, like 2007?
It was, yeah. Very, very like Fugazi Refused influence. Those were my jams at the time.
Okay.
I love those two bands. Yeah.
What do you listen to now?
Oh, I think the Dave from that time would be a little bit shocked. It would be a little surprised. I listen to I still like punk rock and hardcore. It's always been like where I really kind of formulated my love for music. But I don't think I have that kind of angst. I don't have that kind of anger when I listen to music anymore. And I can still appreciate it, but it's not what usually is scratching the itch for me with music these days. So I've kind of gone more towards like I like a lot of music that has more of a groove to it, more funk feel to it. I love a lot of EDM, which I think the Dave from that time would be a little bit like, huh, but
yeah.
Right now there's so much music that really kind of transcends genre, which I think is cool. There's tons of artists that are making music that in one second they're rapping, the next section it's like a hardcore song, the next section it's this chill song that you could make love to. It's great. And I
call
think
that that's Childish Gambino, all of that.
yeah,
I love him.
Yeah.
I love
him. And there's so like when I was younger and listening to music, there was like the mainstream, and then there was like this layer underneath it that as I've gotten older I realized was not that like underground. I thought I was underground, but like so many people I know these bands now that I'm like, okay, I wasn't that underground, but now there really is this underground. There's really like all styles of music can be independent, and I think that's what I still like is if there is a genre that's called indie, which is different from the early 2000s and 90s. Like indie now has all sorts of different kinds of artists. I think that's what I gravitate to. I still love the do-it-yourself artists that aren't relying on a huge budget, and they're just kind of creating something that's like really from the heart. And I think that's what I loved about punk rock. It was very emotionally based. And some people I remember like when I tell them I like hardcore and I'd show them something, they'd be like, oh, you'll like this heavy metal, this like death metal band. And no disrespect to death metal or metal in general, but it was different to me. Like I felt like punk rock and hardcore was much more emotionally driven, and it was different to me in that sense. And even though they're all screaming, they're all doing that, it's different. And I think that a lot of the indie music and the music I still listen to now, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for someone who's in touch with that element of them, and that's trying to create it, just like I'm doing on paper with my comics.
That's great. Way to tie that all together too, man. Nice little bow. I don't have to do anything. Like, just what questions do you have for Art, Dave? Like, so Art, like, what about you? What music? I know you mentioned Childish Gambino. Like, what music do you find yourself drawn to?
The complete symphonic recording of Les Mis all the time.
Perfect.
No.
Have me with a good time. I've got the 24601 tattooed right on my throat.
Do you really? Right on.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Whoa.
Wow.
It's there.
That's amazing.
I just saw Les Mis like 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
Dude,
no, it's still one of my favorites. It's still one of my favorites.
Let's alienate all your fans, because I just went to go see Carmen and I loved it. It was awesome.
Listen, people always I have this vest and I get the hair and all this stuff, but like I love musicals, dude. Yes. I love them.
Okay, hold on. Can we talk about Les Mis for a second? I've watched it transform over the so many years where just a scene where they're in the sewer.
Yeah.
When they're over the years they didn't have the projection in the background, and they started using projection. It's amazing watching even that evolve through technology over time. Like I'm like they're adjusting with what's being available, which is good for them for adjusting. But nothing wrong with musicals. It's still hard writing. It's music.
I don't know about Cats. Don't tell me you love Cats.
I can't. No.
I'm okay.
I can't do it, man.
Come on. No, thank you.
Yeah.
No offense, but I'm good.
When I saw Les Mis, the thing that stood out to me was like the set. Right? Mm-hmm. Like the first time I saw it was 2003, I think. And it was a very different set. And this one had like aspects to it that would move. And then I was like, oh, that's a set. Okay, got it. I understand like what bar that's on, what curtain rope they're pulling. Understood. But then in other scenes, the same piece would come out and like
Yes.
they would
It's
swivel.
just two pieces that just do most of the scenes. It's wild.
Insane.
Yeah, cool.
Like,
that's awesome.
and because I did theater in high school, like I was only ever theater. I know, shocker. And then like even into college, and I was like, wait, I got to get a real job. I can't do theater. And then, you know, I tried it as an adult and I'm like, this is not the thing for me. But like, I'm a nerd for how things work.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that's why I was drawn to broadcasting. And that's why I still do video production stuff for college here in my town. Like I just love being on this side and understanding how all those things come together. So when I see a big production or I go to Disney, like I was paying attention to stuff that no one else was looking at. Like I think I have like 70 pictures in my phone. 50 of them are of trash cans because like every trash can is themed differently for where it was. And like that level of attention to detail. And even in comics, that's why I'm looking at background characters and looking at what's happening outside of just the main characters and like the main thing that's happening. I'm a sucker for like looking at it and doing a page turn, like, oh, hang on, like I didn't see that big page turn moment coming. And it's because I'm wired to see how things work. And once I do, I have such a deeper appreciation for it. Like I've watched so many movies that my wife would be like, I'm not watching that with you, but I'll watch it because I just appreciate like how it's made, or I'll know like there's a scene in Knives Out. They were using a boom camera and it was supposed to come up onto the deck and then follow them as they walked off the deck and then down the driveway. The boom froze, like it completely died. The operator knew that it was fritzing, and so it got there, and there's a moment where I saw BTS of him running. He grabs the camera and then follows them like the jib was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it's so fluid that if you don't know that as you're watching it, you're like, oh yeah, that's just a bit whatever. But then you see that happen, you're like, God, that dude is insanely talented to be able to run that camera. And like, I just have a deeper appreciation for that movie.
He knew the shot. He knew the shot
because he knew what he was doing, and it was so seamless. Anyway, I'm a nerd for like deconstructing things, and I'm not talking about like the chopped. Like I made a deconstructed salad. Here's a leaf of lettuce and some shaved carrot. Enjoy.
I mean, you were too lazy to toss it in the bowl. Is what it was.
Yeah, you didn't have time to put it together with some dressing. Got it. Thank you, chef. Next, you're chopped. We watch a lot of competition food in my movie. In my house, it's not a movie. I'm completely off base, guys. I have no idea what we were talking. I'm just going to be real with you. I was just enjoying where we were going, and now here we are. So California Inc. It's always good to just come back to the series. I'm going to cheat and look at your Kickstarter page. So you were we talked about it. You funded less than 13 hours. You have 16 days to go. You're at 145 backers. That backer number just went up during this show. I'm taking credit for that one. So you're welcome. This probably has nothing to do with this.
We accept.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chris.
Hey, I'm just here for you guys. I believe in the creative, independent comic book makers, which is why I started the whole show. You've got a whole lot of levels for your rewards, which I love. Like, as you were coming up with, and I know also, like, I hope you don't have anything going on because we're just going to talk all night because I'm having a great time talking to you guys. But like, you have a lot of like really cool add-ons and stuff. You've got like a pin and patch package that you can do to bundle. Like, you're speaking to my soul, and like, you've got the catch-up tiers. So even though this is the 4th issue, people can get all 4 issues of the story to get completely caught up, digital or physical. Like, and as somebody that's late to a lot of games, that's so helpful. Like, I'm a completist, and I know other people are too, to get the whole story. Like, were the rewards just like, did you guys talk about those? Like, all right, so Kickstarter, like, here's what we're going to do. Or did you look at what the landscape was and be like, that?
No, I try not to put any of that on Dave. I'm the marketing guy. I don't mind. I love marketing as much as I love being creative. I think it's a different kind of creative. I try to look at things from the point of view, at least when I'm making something when I'm putting it out there, is the experience of the person who's going through it. As somebody who, if you look at my profile, I've backed over 250 books myself. If I'm new to a book that's on issue 5 and I get in there, I can only get issue 5. It's like, I'm not going to back your story. I like you as a person. I'll give you a few bucks, but I don't want to issue 5 if that's all I can read. So I always think about someone who's new. If they come in, they can get 1 through 4. Or I've known people who missed issue 3 and said, oh crap, okay, well, I'm gonna jump on for 4 and I'll pick up issue 3 as well. And you can get them digitally or physically as well. So I know what that's like on the user side, so I want to make sure that was available to them as well. And we've had people who love the pins and patches, and maybe have picked one up at a show and realized they didn't want the B-Dupe one later on after reading issue 2. And it's like, well, if you want all 4, you can get the whole bundle for and save, I forget it was like $15 or something. So trying to think of, what would get me to go, you know what, when I get all of them now, I'll save. It's like getting 1.5 things for free. So just always thinking about, from my point of view, what would get me to go, that's, why not? If I'm a fan of this thing and I want that thing and I'll save a few bucks and help them out, sure. It's always thinking about how I like to collect things. At least I hope that's how I would like to collect things.
Yeah, I see. I feel the same. I'm not at 250 yet. I'm quickly coming behind you though. But like, I feel the same way when I look at stuff of, there's creators or there's a certain story that just resonates that I'm like, I want all of the things possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give me the prints, give me the sketch cards, give me the remarks cards, give me the buttons, give it all to me. I'll take everything that you have, please and thank you. And then I look at my bank account and I'm like, never mind, I'll just take the book and I'm so sorry, I can't. But like, that's just, that's reality that I have to live in occasionally. I just choose to not as much as possible because it's way more fun in just the creative. Like, I want to have all the things, and then I look around my office here and I'm like, I don't have any more wall space for posters or anything. Like, I don't have anything. And then I look at my wife and she's like, you're done. You don't have any more. We're out of room.
That's why we go
not
digital.
Moving. And that's why I go digital.
Yes.
Guess what, babe? I have a 2 terabyte hard drive. Yay.
and cloud space.
Right. And I pay extra for cloud. I got so much storage. It's ridiculous. All right. So I have 2 more things for you. It's officially the end of my notes here. And again, I just like showing off because, I like how things work and I actually write stuff down. And I'm not looking at my phone every time I look here. I'm looking at my notes to remind me what I'm supposed to be talking about. 2 more things. The first thing is super easy. I'm going to take a screenshot so that we can all pose. And that's going to be the thumbnail that I use here on YouTube. That's mainly, it makes my life easier. And if you want to have some fun, funky pose or whatever, you get to have that. So I'm going to get my keyboard shortcut here, and then I'll count us down from 3 and we'll pose and we'll take a picture. So 3, 2, 1, I'm going to take a few. Great. All right. So there is that. The last part is, see, you wouldn't have been able to do that had I just picked something at random. So
unless I'm just doing it constantly through the conversation.
That's my resting shock face.
He's trying to listen closer.
Right. Listen with your eyes. So the last thing is, part of why I love doing this show is because everybody has a different background. And yet we all have this thing in common called comic books. So I like to just stop talking, even though it's my show. And I want to hear from you. We can go alphabetically if you want. So Art, you'll go first. You know what? Flip it, because you probably always go first. Dave, you're going to go first. Anything that you want people to hear. It could be about California Inc. It could be about why the red acoustic guitar is better than the electric guitar. The content doesn't matter so much as I just want to make sure you have a space to say anything that may be on your hearts or mind that you want people to hear from you. Dave, take it away.
Oh my God, I'm not going to do this justice. It's a really good question. I'm probably just going to say something like, check out my other books. I've got other books I've done. As I mentioned one, the Space Auditorium. We're actually going to have another 3rd volume that I've been working on to get out really soon. I'm really proud of that series too. We've got 2 volumes already. They're about 60 pages each. Super crazy, wild sci-fi fantasy story that's a really different mood than California Ink, but equally fun. And I have a lot of fun drawing that one. I also done another book called Wolf Punks, and I've been doing some covers recently for different audiobooks. One of them is called Dungeon Crawler Carl. And
Shut up. That's you?
Yeah.
Dude, get out of that book is awesome.
Well, so that book is awesome, and those are just my Space Auditorium books. Thanks, Art.
Way to go! What a guy!
Yeah, the Dungeon Crawler Carl. They've been doing they're doing like so that book's been around, and then they did an audio book of it, and currently Sound Booth Theater is doing like a audio drama. So they took the books and they do like a dramatization version of it. And those are the ones I've been doing the covers for, but they've been a lot of fun, and there's some wild characters in that story. So yeah, definitely if you like weird and wild sci-fi, actually it's very similar to Space Auditorium, actually a very similar vein, which is why I think they hired me. So those are great and awesome to listen to. I've been listening to them. They're hilarious. I did all the covers for those, and another series called Vigilante War. And that I did the covers on too, and that's another kind of more of a cyberpunk sci-fi series. So yeah,
sweet. And how would people find said books if they were now interested, which everybody is?
Yeah. All right. Well, you can go to my website, davelawart.com, and there's links to all my work in there. Because some of them are different places. Because like Wolf Punks is sold through a publisher called Lesser Known, and then Space Auditorium is sold direct from me and Chris, and like of course California Ink is Arts Studio 12. 12/7 and the audiobooks they're you would get that through Sound Booth Theater, so
that's great.
Yeah.
And your website and your socials are linked in the show description, as is the Kickstarter campaign. So it's super easy for anybody watching now or listening later on whatever podcasting platform they listen to it on, because there's like 70 bajillion of them. But you just tap the show description or the details or the notes or whatever your platform calls them, and all the links are right there to find Dave and to find Art on all of your Instagram stuff. Art, you're up.
Okay.
What you got for us?
Let's see. Well, Kickstarter we've talked about a few times, so we could stop. Hey, come by it. I guess it's kind of like be kind to yourself out there, people. I know it's hard, and I'm probably talking to myself too. Like there's a lot happening. You think everybody's working hard, and everybody's working, and everybody's doing stuff, and everybody's hustling. They're not, and they might be. And it's okay to not be. I got to tell myself this too. Is like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to enjoy your life. Give yourself grace to breathe. We work hard to live. Don't forget to live. That's really important. And it's tough, but this social media thing really makes us think we're not doing enough. And you're more than enough. The other one that I think is really important is this TV show that I absolutely love. Thanks, Dave.
Made me seem like a jerk. I'm going to
promote
myself.
What do you got, Art?
Yourself. You love yourself.
Love yourself. You're so good.
Buy my
I told you that's how he got me to his booth. That's how he got me to his table. He's like, come here, kid.
Yeah.
Again, missing tooth. He had the balloons and the
it's
dart.
A balance, right? Yeah. Like as the power duo, one balances the other.
Total carny mode. He had like the different games that you never win.
I was wearing tight clothes too, really showing off my cleavage.
Perfect. Yeah, the striped pant, the red and white striped pant. One of those old-fashioned flat straw hats.
And then let's see. My final thing is I've talked about this so many times. Dave's heard me talk about this. Absolutely love the show on Hulu called Reservation Dogs. I can't recommend it enough. Top to bottom, 3 seasons done and done. I think it's 10 episodes each. If you watch it and you don't go through every single feeling that you should as a human, you don't have a soul. It's that well done, that well written. It's I've watched it multiple times. I don't usually watch shows multiple times, and it's I think it's important to watch it too. It's a good show. It's so damn good.
It's a really good
it,
show.
It should have gotten more flowers than it did, but
Mm.
I think it's one of those like it'll get it later on, and it's gonna be past when it should be, but it'll get it later on. And it's a good one. Go do it for yourself.
Perfect. That is a show that I've come across several times, and I've never just been like, I'm gonna give it a try now. So next time I'm ready to feel the feels, I'm gonna watch that one.
It's all the
Definitely, dude.
feels.
Art told me to watch it many times, and I was like, all right. And finally, he was like, dude, you gotta see it. And I was like, all right,
Kid,
all right.
come here, look at my
Come here.
TV.
It was odd because I had a windowless van, and I kept saying I have beer, and I was in front of his house with a trench coat, and I was like, come in here.
Yeah,
Some beer? Want some beer? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, no, we're watching Reservation Dogs.
Gotcha. Dropped you in with the Clockwork Orange style. It's only 3 episodes. I promise it'll be great. 30 episodes later. Such a good show. You're right.
My feelings.
I don't know if I believe you, Dave. Say it again.
Watch it again.
I loved it.
Start from beginning.
Play from beginning.
Oh, I love that. That's where we got to. Guys,
It's
thank you so
important.
much. This has been such a good time. I know we could talk for another hour and 35 minutes and 23 seconds, but we probably shouldn't, because y'all have an evening to live through out there on the West Coast, whereas I just got to get ready for bed. So thanks for coming on and hanging out. I look forward to seeing all of the wild success that California Inc. has in this 4th and final issue. You can again get the entire series, catch up digital and physical, and the sweet add-ons and all the things and all the stuff at the link in the episode description. So just tap that, check it out on Kickstarter. And honestly, like, even if you're like me and you're out of money, share the link a bajillion times, because that helps too. Leave a comment. Those help out a lot.
They do, actually. Yeah.
Like Kickstarter, I'm learning about, because I need to deconstruct. I'm learning about the Kickstarter algorithm, and like comments and likes on updates and all of those things help give that campaign visibility. So even if you're, you don't have to spend any money, which I love. And my wife loves even more. But you can do all of those things, and it's totally free. And the other free thing that I'm really bad at telling people that I need to start doing more of it this year is, like, if you like this, just tell me. Drop a comment. You can share it with your friends on your social networks. You can find me at Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. And so do all the things, and know that we appreciate you, because it's the crowds and it's the creators that make the indie comics for the crowds, that make shows like this possible. So thank you both for making this awesome series and everything else that you have created and contributed to the indie comic scene. Can't believe I said that without stumbling. I'm rambling now, which means I got to hit my tagline. Stay tuned after the break. I got some logistics for the two of you, but what's a good podcast without a good tagline? This is mine. Go do what's good for you, punks, and read some indie comics like California Inc. We are out of here.